Season 1, Episode 8, How to Get Started with Characters. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Survive Until You're Published the podcast, because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
So today we're going to be starting off our second arc this season. The first being theme, the second is going to be characters.
Da-da-da!
Yeah, there's so much to cover with them. So we're going to take pretty much the whole month of July to talk about characters. And that's probably still not enough.
Nope, not at all.
So Amy, what makes a good character? And why is it important that you have good characters?
That is such a loaded question.
It is. It's very loaded.
So characters are everything. Because characters are the one thing in your story that your readers relate to. Unless they're a horse, but
yeah,
you know, I don't think horses can read. But they're the one thing in your story, and so you want to build your characters so that your readers want to come to them. So they want to be their best friend. So they want to understand and know every single thought that goes on in their head.
Yeah, they should also maybe see a piece of themselves in characters. I think it's been said by multiple people that the best stories are driven by compelling characters. And you can have the best plot in the world, but if your characters fall flat, your story is going to fall flat.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. So in Story Genius, one thing that she talks about at the beginning is that when we experience story, when we're experiencing what the character's experiencing, there are scientific studies that show that our brain, the part of our brain that is when we're reading, whatever the character is experiencing, the part of our brain that would experience that same thing is active. So if your character is running really fast downhill, that's the part of your brain that's going to be active. You're experiencing what they're experiencing while you read. That's
why as it goes up to the climax of a story, especially in a thriller, right? It's high-paced. You could have had the intent of going to bed, I'm going to go to bed, just read one more chapter. But then something happens, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so awake, I can't, because you're experiencing that with the character.
Yeah, your heart starts pounding.
Well.
Yeah, your heart starts pounding, you just get really excited, and it's after you get done with that, you feel like you've run a mile. It's because you sort of have, you experience that. So what you're going to want to do is build a character that embodies that makes people feel that. Because if you don't feel that, a reader's gonna pick up your book and then put it down and never see it again.
Yeah, I think you said this to me before. You want your novel to capture your reader to the point where they can't put it down until 2 a.m. So your character needs to show change. They need to show how just how they're interacting with the world. Everything needs to be driven by the character.
Yeah. So, Megan, where do you start with coming up with a character?
Yeah. So I usually don't start with my character. But when I'm coming up with a character, how I start thinking about them is I usually have the world or some idea of a plot that I want to write. So, for example, for my work in progress now, I knew I wanted to write a heist novel. So I was like, oh, okay, what kind of characters would be in a heist? It's okay, you're probably going to have a team of thieves, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of went into that. I was like, okay, well then what kind of people would be on a team? What kind of boundaries do they have? What's their belief system? And then I tried to think of all the compelling characters that have influenced me in my life and kind of picked and chose different aspects of them to mesh them into my character. I also usually actually start by looking at names. So I'll just Google popular baby names or popular baby boy names or girl names during this year, and I'll just kind of scroll through it until I find one, and then I kind of start picturing them in my head and how they could fit into that world and into that story. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I start digging into, okay, well, what problems are they going to face? What's their flaw? Are they selfish? Or because I don't know. I don't like it when stories don't have flawed characters, because I think that is part of what makes a compelling character is they need to be flawed, they need to be relatable, and they need to show the change, kind of like you've said to me many, many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I've done the whole name thing too, and it's actually helped me. One of my main characters, her name is Rowan, and I remember I looked up there's there's the rowan tree, and I looked up like the properties and the folklore behind the rowan tree, and there's a lot out there. But one of the stories was about healing, about how it has the ability to heal. And so I was like, how can I have my main character heal?
Oh,
You
I
know,
love that.
how can she like heal? You know, what is she gonna need to heal? How is she gonna overcome her doubt in herself to be able to heal? You know, that kind of thing. And so anyway, it helped me. I came up with a cool backstory for her and everything, kind of branching off that idea. So names can help.
They definitely help. And I think kind of what you said, the meaning of the name, because it can help you think of characteristics that your character might have and who they are as a person, just little quirks about them. Or so one of my main characters, I looked up his name and it meant strong leader. And I wanted him to be like the team lead for the POV, for the main POV that I'm writing from, right? So I was like, okay, strong leader. Whether or not he knows it yet is one thing, but having the meaning of the name.
Yeah.
But I think it does kind of help. And I think, too, knowing who they are a little bit, where they're started,
Yeah.
kind of helps.
Yeah. So another amazing thing that Lisa Cron talks about in Story Genius is about every novel begins in medias res, which is a Latin term. I definitely didn't say that right. Is a Latin term meaning in the middle of the thing. So, and I love that. She builds off of that really well. So if you really want to dive into that, get her book. But every story really does begin right in the middle. They encourage you to have your first chapter, that first part, be like, you know, right in the middle of something, because it just pulls your story in. But in order to start in the middle, you have to know what has come before. You have to know everything your characters has experienced up until that point. And so understanding their backstory, why they have, where they're at when that story starts, is going to be one of the most crucial parts of building your story, building your character. You want to know where they've come from, what they struggle with, and why, above all.
Yeah, and I think, like, while your readers may never know any of that, it's important that you understand them, and it just helps you keep a consistent character throughout your writing. So what I like to do is just type out their name, maybe like a basic description, and then just write in a blurb as much as I know about the character. Even if it's like weird, quirky things about them, like, I don't know, I don't think I've ever done this, but like how they brush their teeth, or like, you know, like, oh, what side of the bed do they prefer to sleep on? I don't think I've ever gotten like that nitty gritty, but even just stupid stuff like that, you know, just, well, why? And understanding why your character does something. So I think that would be my next step, is after you kind of get a little bit of their characteristics that you want to embody, and focusing on, like you said, for Rowan, like healing, how can she show that, is then the why they are the way they are, finding out their backstory, and then how they're going to react to various things and why they would react to those things. But what do you do if you're having a hard time figuring that out and understanding your character?
That is a good question.
Because I think that's part of the problem sometimes with coming up with the characters. Sometimes you just can't for the life of you understand them or learn those basic things about them.
So that's a great question, and that's something I've been struggling with a little bit. And I think, I mean, it takes patience with yourself and with your character, because characters, a lot of people say that you build your character, that you know everything about your character, but really characters, they build themselves.
They really do.
they build upon each other. They build upon their characteristics. And Lisa Cron talks about this, like, once you understand their backstory, everything kind of comes naturally because you understand how they make decisions. But getting to that point is extremely difficult. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of discovery. I'm on the 4th draft of my work in progress right now, and I am really just now discovering what embodies my character and what she's really struggling with. It takes so many test scenes. So just be patient with yourself and don't give up on them, and write lots of test scenes, write as much as you possibly can to try to just understand her. One thing that I've specifically done that's been really helpful is make them confront what they don't want to confront. And we'll talk about this as we go in our next episode a little bit more. But if you make them confront that can help you understand why they don't want to confront it, what it is they're confronting, all of those struggles.
But how did you figure that out?
It takes a lot of time. What I've done is I've buried my character down to the basic characteristics that I know. So, for example, my second character in my work in progress, his name's Alexander, and all I knew about him was that his parents had died when he was a kid and he was a grouch. That's what I knew. Those two characteristics. And so what I had originally wanted to do was I wanted to write him as a redemptive character where he was on the opposite side of Rowan, one of the bad guys, and then changed good, which is, I love redemptive arcs. They're so good, and I will write one day. But as I dug into his characters, I tried to understand him, that just didn't fit. It just didn't work. I didn't get that good fuzzy feeling inside that said, yes, this is it. It didn't come at all, and I just fought against it. Finally, I was like, okay, let's take it back to the bare bones. What do I know about him? He's a grouch, and his parents died. So I just took it from there. I built it from there. Why is he grouchy? What about his parents' death made him feel that way? How did his parents die, and how did that influence how he felt? I asked all these questions to the end of the world, and sometimes I asked him those questions and put myself in his mind and had him answer them for me.
I think that brings up a good point. Like, if you are struggling with figuring out your character, write testing after testing after testing. Throw them into different genres, scenarios, try to figure them out that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just do everything.
Another one I've heard people say is have an out loud interview with your character, which is kind of what you're talking about, right? Having him answer it, like ask a question. And it sounds crazy and you're talking to yourself, but honestly, that's a lot of what writing is as you're writing the words on the page.
Yeah.
But those are some really helpful things. There's also a million guides out there where it's like character Bible, character like beat sheet or character sheet, and you can kind of ask what's their motivation, what's their physical description, things like that. Books like Lisa Cron's Story Genius, Saves the Cat, Writes a Novel, things like that. Lots of craft books on character have a lot of questions you can ask. Such as like, what is their big flaw or problem, right? And how does this manifest into external problems in your hero's life? What's causing the problem? What do they want, or what's their goal? What's getting in the way of their goal? How are they actively pursuing their goal? Why haven't they achieved this yet? And just kind of answering some of those can help. But also then, I think looking at their relationships with other characters can sometimes help bring out your character. Yeah, for sure. I feel like, that's a crucial part. We've talked about this before, but like love tropes are an interesting way to bring out different characteristics, because if there's a character, like for example, Alexander, who's a grouch, if he's a grouch and he doesn't want to talk to anybody, what is going to happen if he falls in love with somebody? He's going to have to change something. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be able to sit there and still be a grouch. Like, he's got to make a change. And so what you want to do is put that character in the position, whether through a different character or through external sources, you got to push them out of their comfort zone. I think it was Allison Jervis we were talking to in our interview with her, and I can't remember if this made it into this episode or the other one that or the Writer's Block episode she did, or the other one that we're going to be doing. But she talked about how love especially, whether it is romantic love, familial love, like friendship love, can push your character into different circumstances and allow you to dive deeper into them than you would have otherwise. And that's just such a strong emotion that it can kind of help you dig through some of those. So I'd even say, like, if you're struggling with figuring out your character, maybe introduce something like that that's going to create a much stronger emotion, like love, or like what do they do if they hate someone, or just like those very strong emotions.
Yeah.
So how do you find the right character to fit your story?
I love that. That is a good question. So, if you understand your story and your plot, think about the obstacles in your story. Think about the things that are hard, the things that don't make sense, or the things about the world that can be a problem. And then see how your character can fit those problems. Who they are as a person, a written person, can, what is going to happen to them when they're faced with those problems. For example, somebody in a city full of gangs, how are they going to fight back against those gangs?
Or are they going to?
Yeah, or are they going to? Like, what's going to happen? What's going to make them have to fight for their lives and fight for their family and fight for themselves? That's an external problem that they're going to have to face. And so think about those problems. But, if that's not where you want to start, just think about the problems that your character has with themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, Jessica Vitalis kind of talked about this in her Getting Started episode, and also when she was talking to us just about her process, is sometimes she starts with her character, right? But it's like, oh, well, what obstacles could get in this kind of a person's way, right? So maybe you don't know the plot of your story. You just have this idea for this person, and you really, really like this character, but you're having a hard time with them. Understanding them, maybe it is you need to switch up some of the obstacles they're facing to better match with their personality or their flaws in the lesson and your theme that you're trying to learn through them. Or maybe they do need a different genre.
Or different setting. Yeah, switch things up, change things. Like, I had to totally change my Alexander redemptive arc, which is very heartbreaking for me. But it didn't match him. It just didn't. And I understood him well enough because I had worked really hard to understand him that I knew that wasn't gonna work. And so you have to go through the hard work. And another thing too, and this is just in general, have faith in your story. You'd be surprised at how anything can really work. When I was writing my first manuscript, I remember hitting so many roadblocks where I'm like, this just it isn't right. This isn't right. It's not working. But in the back of my head, I was like, no, I can make this work. Any story can work. You can put weird pieces together and you can make a way for it to work. So have faith in that. Have faith in what you can build, how your story can come together, that even if some things don't make sense right now, that you'll be able to understand how to put them together.
Yeah, I love that. So Amy, what challenge would you leave with our listeners on getting started with characters?
Okay, so what my challenge is to you is to dumb down the basic things you know about your character, that you know are like sure and true, not characteristics. Maybe those could come into effect, but just the basic things that you know are true about them. And then write a basic sketch of that, and then just build from there. See how you can discover more from there.
Well, thank you all for listening. Because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
Have a great week.